Honorable participants, viewers and listeners of Riga Security Forum. Today we are opening the virtual forum podcast and discussions, and this is a great honor to have Mr. President, Mr. Levits, here in the studio. Thank you for coming. Hello. Thank you for participating and agreeing to participate in the discussions about our values in the digital age, and discussions on the topic which is rather topical, especially now, and which you discussed also with President Macron. It is important for development of our society, and it is important for how we develop in the future. And as the Churchill said about the democracy in itself isn't good, but there's nothing better invented. So this is the form of administration which is the best. And democracy is changing, and in the digital age it has its challenges. So the world has become flat. After the Berlin Wall politically, after introduction of the internet, we have very large opportunities for everyone, and we are taking another step in the development, and we are talking about technology substituting human beings. And in this age and time, we are speaking about democracy values, about the values during this time, and everything we've done during the pandemics, the COVID-19 times. This is a threat. Also, the technologies is threat for today's world, and it is topical. Mr. President, yes, this is definitely a large leap of technological development, because the technology changes the way people interact and communicate. And the democracy, of course, is a way how people communicate with each other. And here we see new methods emerging which can change, or they have already changed, the essence of democracy. Classically, democracy means that the citizens are responsible for the whole community, for the whole society, and this is the ideal model since the times of Enlightenment and the time of French Revolution. The human being, the citizen, is informed, rational, responsible, and who uses his information and responsibility in participation in the discourse, and this discourse creates a better society for everyone with improved ideas, etc. It is the best method we've had, but it's not been ideal. In reality, it wasn't perfect. It was the process of formulation of ideas, and there were many filters on its way. Today's filters are creating a world where everyone can participate in the discourse, and it in turn influences the quality of the decisions. So the democracy as a form, and this absolute minimum of democracy criteria, where no other system can be comparable, is the way Berlin said it, that the one good thing about democracy is that at least if you don't want your government, you can remove it without bloody revolutions. So if you look at it, this is how we get to qualitative decisions. And this is the problem at the same time, because if we look at how this cooperation improves and the participation and involvement of the citizen, that it reduces the quality of the decisions. If we're talking about it on the technical level, then what is the performance of democracy? How we can evaluate it. Mr. President, you signed the declaration with the President of Lithuania and France. There it says that the democracy must be protected. Are we talking about this time of opportunities? Does it mean that we have to protect the democratic values? Because, as you said, since the Enlightenment, we have lived for hundreds of years in this awareness and knowledge, and how we have developed, how we have come to this point. The question is, from the classical model of democracy, we have new challenges that arise. And it was due to the development of technology. The biggest challenge is the populism, which means that there is participation and involvement of the citizens in creation of democratic ideas, and they participate with their ideas, but this opinion can have weak filters, and it is sometimes easily manipulated, also intentionally, and there, again, we come to the quality. Of course, we understand that citizens must be aware, they have to have the opportunity to express their opinions, but then we are also asking whether the facts are checked and are they correct, and what is the source of information. This is how we can improve these values. But what is going on currently is that people don't have time. People don't have time to dig deeper into the topic, and also another thing is that there's manipulation opportunities, and they are larger than ever before. So this is how the performance of democracy can be influenced. Once more, I will use this. So what are the results then from that arising economically and socially? And they do not comply always with what the people actually want. And this is how we get to the question, for example, yes, okay, we are here in the democracy, but isn't there another model? Maybe there's some authoritarian model. Maybe this is how we can improve our economics. Maybe this is how the social issues are being solved better. So politically, practically, in reality, this depends on the quality of the decisions which we make within the democracy. So it means the efficiency, how it all is linked to the quality of life for each and every human being living in the society. For example, we are saying that maybe authoritarian regimes are more efficient in some issues. However, it does not provide the opportunity to realize the democratic ideas. Exactly, and now, in the 21st century, we see the society models which are authoritarian, or we must say they're authoritarian democracies in eastern part of Asia. Well, I wouldn't say Russia, but mostly in those regimes, their performance is worse than in the West. But there are examples in the world, and they say, well, could you, in your democracy, could you ensure GDP growth by tens of percents? In the West, we say, we can't. But elsewhere in the world, there are examples with more strict discipline, and this is how they achieve their economic growth. And this is good. Well, I'm not saying it's well-functioning, quote-unquote, well-functioning authoritarian regimes, but they still compete with the Western democracies. Mr. President, I think we could discuss this endlessly. It means that the dynamics after the end of Fukuyama, and we are ever more speaking about this is the world of different models which coexist in the world. We would like to continue their operation, but still I want to go back to the topic, the central topic of today. This is the digital transformation, and digital transformation within the context of development of the democracy. In Latvia, recently, we've had the guidelines of digital transformation on hundreds of pages, and the democracy is mentioned only one. Democratic is mentioned twice. So in these pages there are only three times mentioned the concept which is so important for our society. Isn't it so that the digitalization thus is being perceived as a technical process, and we are not aware that the way the technological world changes is actually influenced by citizens, by values? Are we not concentrating too much on the technical and technological process? And we need this discussion very much. Definitely it is so. We are currently in the situation which I've several times compared to environment protection issues and environment in the 1970s. Up to then, people simply polluted the world and nobody cared about it. But in the 70s, there were activists and thinkers who said, you know, well, maybe let's not fill landfills so much with stuff and start caring about the environment. But mostly nobody cared. In the 80s, these tendencies were maybe a little bit more topical. There were green politics in Latvia. There was Environment Protection Club, which also began with ideas of regaining independence. And it was a normal policy. It grew to be a normal policy, and each and every political party has its environmental policy in place. We are saying international affairs, internal policy, but also environment is there as one of the pillars. And the digital age has influence on the world and on the democratic system. And here we were still as if, so to say, naive believers and hopers, and only now we are becoming more aware, but still very isolated, that this all has consequences and it's not that easy. Mr. President, very well that you actually highlighted the contrasts. We are euphoric indeed, and we are viewing the world and how the technology develops, but Mr. Harari, very influential, and he's being very straightforward. He says that the technological development is more beneficial to the tyrannies because there are two different data processing systems. There's decentralized, local, but for tyrannies and dictatorships it is all centralized, which the centralization of the development of data processing favors more the dictatorships. Yes, I agree. It influences the form, the shape of the society, And currently, the democracy has the tendency to centralize the data processing, both from private actors and stakeholders as large entities and from the part of states. And in essence, today we are operating in the economical system, market economy, capitalism, and with one very important aspect, which is called surveillance capitalism. We are being surveillanced, and this is spying on people, and this is spying and surveillance capitalism. So we are continuously being watched through our mobile devices and other devices which accumulate data about us, and it's not just for fun. They are accumulating data in order to be able to influence us. If there were no possibilities of influence, they wouldn't be accumulating the data. And how is that? Well, our locations, our conversations, and in the law also, and in constitutions of various states, it says that there is the correspondence secret. And I'd say, colleagues, where is it? How do we apply it? Everything is openly available. The idea is to basically profile human beings, the profile of behavior. It's available on me, on you, on all the people in the world. And currently, we can, for example, feed the person with particular information and thus influence their behavior and activity. And here I want to have a philosophical thought also included, that we believe that people are like black boxes. Any human being is a black box, and we think that we are not able to know ourselves to 100%. We're not able to know ourselves that well. But with the technology, we believe that if a person is being given this information, then the person behaves in one way. If it's being fed different information, it behaves differently. This is what is usually done, but again, maybe this is done by the democracies when you are talking about the capitalism purely commercially, when you say you want people to buy something. But politically, if you have this political impact, then it's a different issue. Yes, and here Harari says that how are we going to look at this time from the future? In 20 years, looking back to these times, and this is the risk. We can say that this is the total surveillance. This is the beginning of the time of total surveillance. And this is what you also mentioned, that we have the surveillance economy, surveillance capitalism. Maybe this is also surveillance democracy. You said about the profiles. It's not only about the money. This is how it looks. This is how our society is being managed. Exactly. Management digitalization is a question in which this topic is very sensitive, because in our political philosophy there's an impulse, a momentum for a person obtaining information. Well, we have to think, or we have to make sure that our activities come from within. For example, on Facebook, you have feed with different news, and the Facebook with its algorithm filters out what kind of news to show to you, what kind of information you are being presented, you are being fed, and there is always an aim behind it. You are being shown one information, not the other. And there, it's not us, maybe, not always us, who decide what kind of information we would like to find and acquire. This is where we are, so to say, on a threshold in society like so. We are talking about the autonomy of a human being. Are we, or can we be autonomous? Is this impulse coming from within, from ourselves, or are we saying, in 20 years, is it my authentic will, or is it intentionally being impacted, and it comes from the outside? And this is what Harari says, and other thinkers too, which are speaking about what is the objective of a human being. Is there a free will? Well, is there a free will? Maybe there are neurologists. Neurologists are not certain. But this is the basic notion. The basic notion is that we have the free will and we act accordingly. But we're talking about it being manipulated. So, if there's no reference, how can we evaluate ourselves? This is one of the steps which we have to look at from the viewpoint of, from economical viewpoint, from state administration viewpoint, the centralization tendencies, and the third part is also from the philosophical point of view. Do I want to remain free? Free in a way that I have free impulses and free will. It comes from within me, from my experience, and it's not influenced from outside. You want this, not that. Mr. President, it's good that you are highlighting also the importance of free will and activity, and you talked to corrupt democracy. How can we avoid it? You talked about it with President Macron. Well, if we are serious about the democratic values and how we began this conversation, the values of democracy, in a way that at the very basis we perceive that there is a self-value and autonomous unit. The person is autonomous unit who realizes their fate, decides on their life, and this is how the democracy theory is actually built on, and this also is expressed in the practice. If we act accordingly to these principles and we evaluate from these positions, we have to assess whether we ourselves want to be surveilled all the time. I would say that we have accepted it. We have accepted to be constantly being surveilled, like health data, for example. It's so hard to keep your health data on your mobile phone because the programs, the apps are sending it to their developers. And then they know everything about me better than I know about myself, about my health condition, which is a very important factor. And from that it can be decided on the means of impact. But again, I'm just a human being. I just want to count my steps. I don't want the data to be sent anywhere. I want to have the data on my phone sent nowhere. And this is the question of the political decisions of lawmaking. If it were forbidden, I'd say it would be solved in such a way, because our internal autonomy is not being protected. We don't protect it ourselves. We allow such surveillance. And I know that people also do it, and I do it, is restrict the use of data and sending of the data as much as I can. But it's not possible completely. Of course, you can restrict it in a way, but the question is, are we as a society aware of these problems, that we know that our data is being sent? Why are people not drawing attention more to these aspects? And these are the aspects which Harari also talks about. Why are we allowing for this situation to develop like that? And this is what our conclusions will be in 20 years. This is the question. What the technicians, the engineers, the software developers, the scientists also insist on what the technology can do, and it will be able to do even more and more. It becomes more potent and with more capabilities. But for the democracy, the most important question is not what the technology can do, but not what the equipment and digital solutions can do, but what we want from the technology, what it should do for us. It is our will. We are the ones to set the task for the technology. Mr. President, this is the best case scenario, and are we going to be able to control the artificial intelligence, big data, which involves us ever more, researches us ever more, and this is all the dynamics. Yes, artificial intelligence is another step forward. So the question is, do we should discuss in the society and make political decisions, do we want to be watched over constantly? And this is the direction of the development of digital global technology. But Mr. President's surveillance, who does it? Is it the companies? Is it the state? It's both. You know, the companies, there are not that many. It's just a couple of several companies, and in Luxembourg, there were large litigations of Google and Facebook, and they don't like those rulings. And but I think this is the central political issue which must be solved, and I know that Latvia can do it, but the European Union is indeed a platform which we discussed with President Macron during his visit here and also in the public discussion. I think that the awareness is increasing, that this now is the question, is the issue, what we politically want from the technology. I think it's a great direction of this conversation, what we want, how to coordinate legally from one part and also philosophically from the other. As I said, you signed the declaration on the necessity to fight influencing the voting and elections, and now also on elections. We have the discussion from one part. We are talking about the technology involvement, but aren't there those risks? Should we give the opportunity for Latvian citizens to vote electronically? Because lately this discussion is ever more topical, that we are providing extra data, and that electronically the voting cannot be anonymous. I am skeptical if there's a possibility to ensure all the means of security necessary. And one problem we need to understand, this is that voting is secret. It's well, and when I sit at my computer, I'm not sure if somebody is not watching me from behind or maybe trying to influence my decision somewhere on the internet, but maybe you change your decision. This is one of the questions also for Constitutional Court, which made a ruling to forbid electronic voting. And why? It's because we cannot determine the errors or credibly determine errors and manipulations. As with ballots, you know, if there are issues, and there are also oftentimes, so we can recount the ballots. But now, if we electronically vote on something, how do we determine that there's been some influence? We need to then call the software developer, engineer, and they say, well, there's no issue, there's no error. But then again, the person says, no, there is. This is a very important task. Maybe there will be digital observers. But again, the issue is, do we rely on the viewpoint of the technology specialists who are going to then give their verdict? But what about the classical votings and elections? I think, what would it be beneficial really to have this digital voting? I'd say I am in favor of it, but is it really that hard to go to cast your vote? Maybe just take a couple of steps. I don't know if this risk is worth it. I'm not absolutely against electronic voting, but the risks must be taken into consideration. And the Constitutional Court, I think, justified very well their decision, and they talked about this risk of inability to prove. And there's always been like that. In every elections we have someone complaining, filing claims, and we do recount the ballots. We are reviewing the cases of purchasing.
Prezident kungs, lieliski, ka dodamies tālāk, laiks skrien ātri, un tas tikai parāda, cik šai tēmai ir daudz dimensijas. Sociālie mēdīji. Viens puses šī saruna nebūtu iespējams.
On one hand, this conversation wouldn't be possible without ability to be on social media, and in this way we are making the society more aware of certain topics. But on the other hand, we are fighting the information bubbles influence by the political forces, so fake news also becoming more topical on our agenda. But I'm going to be provocative. Isn't it so that fake news is actually something we want to hear? It's something we demand. When we see the social media, how can we fight fake news, and whether we have to fight at all? Exactly so. It's not that easy with the fake news, because fake news is what you said, exactly what we want to hear. If we are hearing more of what we want to hear, this becomes our reality. And people living in the social bubbles, and they are there, and they say, well, from what I see, all the society thinks the way I think. For example, there's part of the society who thinks that COVID-19 is a conspiracy. And so they read the same information which confirms what they believe. This is how everybody thinks. Why isn't our government not considering it? And here, again, I'm not sure what they want to achieve with this conspiracy theory and what is the grounds of it, but this is the environment where populism can develop. Because the populism actually contradicts. On one part, it has the society. The society is how I think. I think so, and that's why the society thinks so. And on social media, you will find someone who thinks similarly, but we are ignoring the someone standing next to you and actually not believing what you say. From the viewpoint of democracy, and this is what the democracy means, it is the discourse between all members of the society, both those who think alike and those who disagree. This threatens the decision-making quality. The second thing is that over time, a human being receives ever more information and learns more and constantly receives the same confirmation, and you can live like that in the bubble like that, and you will believe that the world is like that for many years to come. This is one of the aspects, but I would like to say on the technology, and I would like to also highlight that we need to make political decisions what we want to achieve with the technology, not what the technology can do, but what we want to do with them. This is the real question. We know there are fields where we are already, where we've been saying for long ago, like in here, for example, in this topic, the science doesn't go any further, doesn't develop. There are scientists who want to research how it works, but it's not allowed. For example, with biological weapons. Biologic weapon research is forbidden. However, there are scientists who say, we would like to know more, but they say, well, it's too dangerous. And maybe in also in these aspects there, we're talking about the science ethics. Mr. President, very well. You are now talking about morals of science and philosophy and global in the global environment. And are we talking about the new colonization? There are the big states like the USA, China, the ones who are capable of manipulate, to work with the Internet of Things, and for big countries there are big opportunities and possibilities, but Latvia is in the ocean of the global environment, how we can influence and create the environment which is necessary and beneficial to small states. Digital technology is difficult to remain, it's difficult to keep it within the borders of one state. We're talking about it having no boundaries. So where possible, and we also talked about the digital management or total digital management, I believe this is the national issue and we can decide how we want ourselves. And there, I believe that the European Union is the appropriate platform. I'm not saying it's the center of the world or central body, but it's one of, and it's sufficiently large and strong. And here, Latvia, being the member state, through this platform, we can also participate in creating the public awareness. we are talking about making Latvia more European for 30 years now, since regaining independence, and these are the ideas we obtain and we adopt from the Europe, which we previously talked about was somewhere else. It was a different place from us, but now there's this new Europe, which we are part of, and now we say we are Europe. We are here, we have standards in place, they are European standards, and together with Belgium, Portugal, this is how we also develop the values. These are our values which are being represented. And in this field, Latvia also have the opportunities, and we need to work together in forming the policies. And you also mentioned, we mentioned Mr. Macron's visit. It was very good. We had common opinion. We believe that the Europeans are not as united in their ideas. However, we still have the opportunity to develop it. And for Latvia, it is also important because there's nobody ahead of us. There are no principles. Nobody says how to treat the technology responsibly, or maybe there will be some methods we will later on be able to only adopt. So there's no one. We are compact. We have slightly more than 2 million people living in our state, so we have ideas, and if we develop them, if we create them, that would be great. Really great. But the last question then, Mr. President, is that if we are the ones to be able to set the agenda for Europe, anyways, the existential and basic questions remain. The imbalance and the security and the democracies which European countries are, mainly, this is our force, our openness, but maybe it's also our disadvantage. How can we keep our freedom and also increase the security? Not to lose the freedom upon the development of security. And in the digital age, definitely this issue is going to be ever more topical. Here we must find the optimum balance. Freedom without security. Well, usually we're not on any end of the spectrum. There must also be progress, and I think that before that this balance was present in democratic societies. Maybe now we are in a slight imbalance, but we must think about how to regain it, and if we set forth the correct questions. And as I said, I will repeat myself in the global context. What we want from the digital technologies? Do we want, for example, it's pretty clear that we want to improve the healthcare in cancer treatment on early stages of the disease. Do we want to be watched over and surveilled? Do we want to be influenced whether to buy one water or the other water? Do we want to be influenced on our political decisions? We definitely don't want, and this is the question to set. To discuss, this is the political question. It's not technical issue. The software developers are not the ones to decide on it. Mr. President, thank you very much. I think this discussion is also part of the democratic process, and I must say Mahatma Gandhi said that In order for the democracy to be efficient, not only facts are important, but also the experience and education. Education, which involves so many things, including critical thinking and responsibility to discuss particular things and the importance of the freedom and democracy, and we don't want to lose it whatever the times come and whatever the environment we live in, for example, now as digital age. I think we have to continue such discussions. These are important topics. This is the future, which is ever more topical. Thank you. Thank you indeed, and I think the questions we discussed today in the 2020s, this is going to be the central question, not only in Latvia, but in the discourse of politics in Europe and globally. And we can connect to, link ourselves to this discussion and specifically also promote this with our thoughts and political values and ideas. Mr. President, thank you very much. Thank you.